Lyra held her tiny child tightly against her chest, feeling the fragile heartbeat under her palm. The air around them was cold, sharp, and unwelcoming, and the dim lights of the outer market flickered like weak stars in a dying sky. Her child's small cries pierced the silence, cutting into Lyra's heart with every shiver. She had no food left. Nothing. And the hunger in her child's belly was growing unbearable. Lyra herself was weak, her purple skin pale and patchy from malnutrition, but she couldn't think of herself. She only thought of the little life she had brought into a cruel, dying world. Her planet had been failing for years. The oceans had begun to evaporate, crops had failed, and her people's stores of food had dwindled until they were barely enough for survival. And now, in this desperate hour, Lyra's options had run out. She walked through the market, her arms wrapped protectively around the tiny bundle of life, feeling the stares of humans who did not understand her kind, who only saw alien features and strange forms. Their voices were sharp, their intentions uncertain. Lyra swallowed hard. Her mind raced through possibilities, each more frightening than the last. There was only one choice left, a choice that made her stomach twist in shame and fear. She could sell herself. In the human trading market, her body, her skills, and even her freedom could be exchanged for food. For her child, she could endure whatever horrors awaited her. Her chest ached at the thought, but the soft whimpers of her child drove her forward. She approached the auction platform, her steps slow, trembling, but determined. Other aliens and humans moved past her, and she tried to avoid their eyes, feeling the weight of judgment and curiosity pressing down. Her mind filled with guilt and fear. She was not a criminal, not a traitor. She was a mother trying to save her child. And yet in this moment she felt the crushing shame of being treated as property. As she climbed onto the platform, Lyra wrapped the child closer, whispering soothing words in a language only the two of them shared. "I will save you. I promise. I will not let you die." Her voice shook, but her resolve hardened. Every eye in the room seemed to bore into her, measuring, calculating her worth. She tried to focus on her child, feeling the warm pulse against her chest, the tiny hands that clutched her fingers instinctively. That warmth was her anchor, her reason to survive. The bidding began, humans murmuring their offers, some high, some low, some cruelly calculating. Lyra barely noticed the numbers. All she saw was the look of her child, fragile and innocent, depending on her for survival. She forced herself to breathe steadily, to hold back the sobs threatening to spill. Then, a human stepped forward, a tall man with kind eyes that seemed different from the rest. He looked at her, not like property, but like a person. His presence was calm, almost reassuring. He offered a price, and the auctioneer's voice echoed the number through the hall. Lyra's heart jumped, a small spark of hope flickering inside her. Could this human be different? Could someone actually care? She nodded silently, accepting the bid. Her hands trembled, but the little warmth in her child's grasp gave her strength. She had expected coldness, cruelty, indifference, but instead, she sensed something unfamiliar, gentleness. The man's gaze held no malice, no calculation, only a quiet understanding. A respect she had not expected to see. As she descended from the platform, clutching her child, Lyra's mind was a storm of fear, shame, and hope. The future was unknown, the human's intentions unclear. But for the first time in days, she allowed herself a single thought. Perhaps, just perhaps, her child might live. And for that fragile hope, she was willing to endure anything. Lyra tightened her hold, inhaling the faint scent of her child, feeling the soft pulse of life against her heart. This was the beginning of a dangerous, uncertain journey. But in that moment, amidst fear and despair, one truth burned brightly in her soul. She would fight for her child. Whatever it took, whatever the cost. The room smelled of metal and sweat. Humans moved quickly, voices sharp and commanding, while other aliens waited nervously, their eyes darting around the hall. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, a rapid rhythm that matched the tiny beats of her child's heart against her own. She held the bundle tighter, feeling the warmth of the small body and drawing courage from it. Every step felt heavier than the last, and yet she climbed the small platform that would decide their fate. The auctioneer's voice rang out, loud and precise. Next lot, female alien, purple skin, young mother of one. Start the bidding. Lyra's stomach nodded. She had known this day would come, but the sound of being called a lot felt like a blade against her soul. She glanced down at her child, whose small eyes looked up at her with innocent trust. The child did not understand what was happening, did not know that her survival depended on strangers deciding the worth of her mother. Bidding started immediately. Hands shot up, numbers were shouted, and Lyra tried to focus on her breathing. Each call of a price made her pulse spike. Some humans whispered among themselves, judging her hair, her skin, her eyes. She tried not to listen, but the words pricked her pride, reminding her that in this world she was seen as a commodity. Her chest ached with shame, but she could not allow herself to think of it for long. She had to survive for her child. Then a figure appeared in the crowd, a human man, tall, calm, with eyes that seemed to search for something beyond the surface. Lyra felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly buried beneath years of fear and mistrust. Humans were traders, buyers, sellers. They were not saviors. Still, he stepped forward, raising his hand and making an offer. The auctioneer repeated it, and silence fell for a heartbeat. It was enough. Lyra's stomach twisted. She had expected indifference. She had expected someone to see her only as a way to gain profit. But this human's gaze was steady, almost gentle. He did not look at her like she was a prize or a toy. He looked at her as though he could see her fear, her exhaustion, her love for the small child in her arms. A strange warmth stirred in her chest, a feeling she had not dared to hope for in weeks. The bidding continued, a few others trying to outbid him, but he matched every offer calmly. There was no aggression, no mockery, only patience and determination. Lyra's heart raced. Could this human be different from the rest? Could he actually care about her and her child, not for profit, but for them? She dared not breathe, dared not hope too much. Her survival, and her child's, hung on this moment. Finally, the gavel struck. Sold, the auctioneer declared. Lyra's legs trembled as she stepped down from the platform, clutching her child closer than ever. The man approached with a slow, careful step. He bent slightly, looking at the child with a soft expression, and then at her. "You don't have to be afraid," he said gently. Lyra froze, her heart stuttering. No one had spoken to her like that. No human had ever offered anything but fear, danger, or cold indifference. She wanted to believe him, but the years of struggle and betrayal pressed down on her. She wanted to ask if it was a trick, if kindness could really exist in this world. Instead, she nodded silently, too weary to speak. Her body trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of hope and fear tangled together. The man guided her and her child toward the exit, keeping his movements careful, almost reverent. Lyra felt the first small flicker of relief in weeks. Perhaps for the first time she was not alone. Perhaps someone could help her survive, not because she sold herself, but because he chose to care. Her child stirred in her arms, and Lyra whispered softly, maybe we will live. And for that single, fragile hope, she walked forward, leaving the hall behind, stepping into a future she could not yet see but was beginning to believe in. The small home was quiet, warm, and foreign. Lyra stepped inside, holding her child close, and felt a wave of relief mixed with fear. The walls were clean, the air smelled faintly of herbs, and soft light glowed from lamps she had never seen before. For the first time in weeks, she felt the difference between survival and mere existence. Yet fear lingered. This human had bought her, but what would he want? Would he treat her cruelly or leave her and her child to die anyway? Marcus, the human who had bought her, knelt down gently, his hands empty and open. "You can set her down if you like," he said softly. Lyra hesitated, unsure. She had been taught to distrust humans, to expect the worst. But the warmth in his voice, the calm steadiness in his movements told her that maybe, just maybe, this human was different. Slowly, she placed her child on the soft mat. The little one blinked at the light and yawned, too small to understand danger or safety, only feeling the warmth around her. Marcus stepped closer, carrying a bowl of food that smelled strange but comforting. "Eat," he said simply, holding it out. Lyra's stomach tightened with a mix of hunger and embarrassment. She had not eaten in days, but her pride screamed that she should refuse. Yet the sight of her child reaching out for food, weak and trembling, made her surrender her dignity. She took the bowl, her hands shaking, and ate slowly, savoring each bite. The food was simple, but it filled her with a sense of safety she had almost forgotten. Her child curled against her side, finally sleeping without fear. Lyra stared down at the tiny form, feeling the steady rise and fall of breathing that told her the child was alive, safe, for the first time in many nights. Her heart ached with relief, with exhaustion, and with the faintest glimmer of hope. She had expected this night to be full of fear, yet here, for a moment, she could breathe. Marcus sat beside her quietly, not demanding conversation, not pressing questions, just present. Lyra could feel his attention without it being intrusive. "You are tired," he said softly. "Rest. I'll watch over her." She wanted to mistrust him, wanted to think it was a trick, but something in his calmness and patience made her pause. Perhaps he truly meant it. Perhaps there were humans capable of care, even love, even for someone like her. The hours stretched on, and Lyra slowly let her muscles relax for the first time in weeks. Her mind, which had been spinning with fear, shame, and hunger, began to settle. She realized that the worst of her journey had been surviving alone, fearing humans at every step. But now, there was someone beside her who did not see her as a commodity, who did not threaten her and who made her feel, for the first time in a long while, that she could survive without losing her dignity. She glanced at Marcus again, feeling a strange pull in her chest that she could not name. Gratitude, maybe. Relief. Perhaps something even deeper, something dangerous to admit, even in her thoughts. She swallowed and focused on her child instead, feeling the soft warmth against her chest, letting it ground her. Survival was no longer just about food and shelter. It was about trust, about hope, and about the fragile beginnings of connection. The night deepened, shadows stretching across the floor, and Lyra finally closed her eyes. Her child slept safely. Marcus kept watch, and for the first time she allowed herself a single thought. Maybe this human, this stranger who had bought her, could be something more. Maybe he could be a protector, a friend, perhaps even family. She did not dare hope too much, but she let the small ember of trust glow inside her heart. As the soft sounds of breathing filled the room, Lyra whispered to herself, barely audible, "We might survive. Together. And for the first time in weeks." The word survival felt like more than just staying alive. It felt like the possibility of life, warmth, and even something like love. Days passed slowly, each one folding into the next, like the soft turning of a page. Lyra stayed close to her child, feeling the little one grow stronger with every meal Marcus provided. Her arms no longer shook as much when she held the child, and the hollow ache in her stomach was gradually replaced by warmth and fullness. But even more than food or shelter, what surprised her was the quiet kindness Marcus offered, something she had never expected from a human. He never commanded or pressured her. Instead, he learned her language, asking her about her people, her customs, even her childhood. At first, Lyra answered cautiously, only small words, wary of revealing too much. Humans had always been unpredictable, often cruel, and she had no reason to trust him completely. Yet each day she noticed tiny signs of patience and care. He laughed softly at her child's tiny, clumsy movements, and sometimes he mimicked her alien gestures, trying to communicate in the way her people did. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the small windows, Lyra watched Marcus interact with her child. The baby reached for him with tiny fingers, and Marcus bent down to meet her gaze. "Hello, little one," he said gently. Lyra's heart clenched. No one had ever addressed her child with such tenderness. It was not just feeding her or keeping her safe. It was the effort to connect, to care, without demanding anything in return. Lyra realized she was learning something herself. Each day, her walls, built from fear and survival, began to crumble. She laughed quietly when her child tried to crawl toward Marcus and fell, her small body rolling onto the soft mat. Marcus caught the child in his arms with careful hands, setting her back down without scolding, only smiling. The scene was simple, yet it touched Lyra more deeply than she could have imagined. For the first time, she felt a sense of normalcy, a life that was not defined by danger, hunger, or fear. That evening, Marcus brought her a warm drink. He sat beside her, careful not to crowd, yet close enough that she could feel his presence. "You have done so much," he said softly, his voice steady, comforting. "You risked everything for your child. That makes you brave, not because of what you sold, but because of what you protect." Lyra felt her chest tighten. No human had ever spoken to her like that, not even her own people in times of fear or shame. His words carried no judgment, no expectation, only recognition. Tears threatened to spill, but she blinked them back, overwhelmed by a mix of relief and awe. Perhaps humans were not all cruel traitors. Perhaps some could see courage in others, even those they had just bought. Days turned into weeks. Marcus continued to provide safety, food, and care. He never treated her as a possession, never questioned her choices, and slowly, Lyra began to trust him. She watched him at night, when he would quietly ensure the doors were locked, the small home secure. She noticed how he observed her child, checking if she was warm enough, safe enough. The effort was gentle, deliberate, human in a way that touched her deeply. Lyra felt something unfamiliar stirring in her heart. Gratitude, yes, but also a fragile hope, and even the beginnings of affection. She realized that trust could grow slowly, like a plant reaching for sunlight, and that perhaps humans were capable of more than survival instincts and greed. Some could care, genuinely and selflessly. As she held her child that night, Lyra whispered softly, "We are safe. Maybe even happy." Her child stirred, reaching tiny hands for her face, and she kissed her gently. For the first time, she allowed herself a quiet, cautious smile. The ember of hope had been lit, fragile but real. She was beginning to believe that survival could mean more than just staying alive. It could mean being loved, and perhaps even learning to love in return. Peace never lasted long in Lyra's world. For weeks, her days had been calm, filled with laughter and soft moments she thought she would never have again. Her child's cries had become happy giggles, and Marcus's quiet presence had turned their fear into something close to safety. But life had a cruel way of testing peace. One cold morning, when the sun was just beginning to rise, loud voices came from outside the small home. Lyra froze instantly, clutching her child close. The sharp tone of human words reached her ears, rough, demanding, and angry. Her heart began to race. She knew those voices. Traitors. Marcus was already at the door, his face tight and serious. "Stay inside," he said firmly. Lyra's throat went dry. She had been through enough to know that when traitors came, they never brought good news. Her body trembled as she pressed her child against her chest, praying silently that this peace would not be taken away. Through the thin walls, she could hear every word. "Marcus, you bought her too cheap," one of the men said harshly. "That alien woman is rare. Others would pay double for her." "She's not for sale," Marcus replied, his tone calm but strong. "Not for sale?" The man laughed cruelly. "Everything's for sale. You think you can just keep her and the brat? They belong to the market. To us." Lyra's breath caught. Fear flooded her veins, cold and sharp. Her child whimpered softly, sensing her distress. She held the tiny body closer, tears already burning her eyes. The memories of being hungry, helpless, alone, they all came crashing back. Then she heard Marcus again, this time louder, more forceful. "You'll leave them alone." "I paid for her. That means the contract is mine. You have no claim here." There was silence for a few seconds, and then the sound of footsteps moving closer to the door. Lyra's hands tightened protectively around her child. A sudden crash followed, a fist hitting the door. "We'll be back," one man growled. "Don't get too comfortable with your pet alien human." When the voices faded, Lyra remained frozen in place. The quiet felt heavier than before. Marcus stepped inside, his expression hard, but when his eyes met hers, it softened. "It's all right," he said gently. "They won't hurt you. Not while I'm here." Lyra wanted to believe him, but her body still shook with fear. "They'll come back," she whispered. "They always do." Marcus knelt beside her, his hands steady as he placed them gently on her shoulders. "Then I'll be ready," he said firmly. "You and your child, you're safe with me. I promise." Something in his voice made her look up. There was no hesitation, no doubt. It wasn't just kindness, it was conviction. He wasn't saying it to comfort her. He meant it. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. She hadn't cried like this since before the hunger, before the endless fear. "Why?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "Why do you care so much?" "I am not your kind." Marcus gave a faint, sad smile. "Maybe that's exactly why," he said. "Because you shouldn't have to be human for someone to protect you." Lyra's chest tightened painfully. The simplicity of his words broke something inside her, something hardened by years of pain. For the first time in her life, someone saw her not as alien, not as property, but as a person. That night, after putting her child to sleep, Lyra sat by the small window, staring out at the stars. The fear still lingered, but beneath it was something else, a quiet strength. Marcus had stood up for her. He had faced danger without hesitation. She whispered into the stillness. "Maybe humans are not all cruel." In the next room, Marcus stayed awake, his weapon by his side, eyes alert. He had no intention of letting anyone touch them. Whatever came next, he would fight for them with everything he had. And as Lyra watched the sky, holding her sleeping child close, she realized something powerful. She was no longer alone. Someone was willing to stand between her and the darkness. And that meant everything. The days after the traitor's visit were heavy with silence. Lyra could feel it in the air, the tension, the quiet before something terrible. Marcus tried to act calm, but she could see the worry in his eyes, the way his hand often rested near the small blaster at his side, always ready. He knew they would return, and so did she. Lyra couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made her flinch. Every creak in the floorboards made her heart race. Her child slept peacefully in her arms, unaware of the danger creeping closer. Lyra often watched the little one's face and wondered if this fragile happiness would end too soon. One evening, Marcus sat beside her near the small fire that warmed the room. "They'll come soon," he said quietly. His voice was steady, but his jaw was tense. "But you don't need to worry. I have a plan." Lyra looked at him, confused and afraid. "They will hurt you," she said softly. "Humans like them. They take what they want." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Not this time," he said. "They think they can scare me, but they've already made one mistake." Lyra frowned. "What mistake?" Marcus looked into her eyes. "They think you're alone. But you're not. You have me now." Those simple words hit her harder than any weapon. For a moment, Lyra couldn't breathe. No one had ever stood beside her like this. Not since her world began to fall apart. Her throat tightened with emotion she didn't know how to express. All she could manage was a whisper. "Why do you care so much?" Marcus smiled faintly, a soft sadness in his eyes. "Because caring is what makes us human," he said. "And maybe it's what makes us better." Before Lyra could answer, a sound shattered the moment, the deep roar of engines outside. The traitors were back. Harsh voices echoed through the night, shouting Marcus's name. Lyra froze, clutching her child tightly, her body trembling. Marcus stood up calm but ready. He glanced back at her. "Stay inside. Don't come out no matter what happens." Lyra wanted to stop him, to tell him to run, but the determination in his eyes silenced her. He opened the door and stepped outside, facing the cold wind and the shadows beyond. The traitors stood there, armed and smirking. "We warned you," one of them said. "Hand over the alien and her brat, or we take them, and maybe burn this place while we're at it." Marcus's voice was low but steady. "You're not taking them." "Not today. Not ever." Laughter echoed through the night. "You think you can fight us all?" Marcus didn't answer. He moved with precision, using the cover of darkness and the terrain around his small home. The fight was swift and fierce. Shots rang out, flashes of light tearing through the night. Lyra held her child close, whispering prayers, tears streaming down her face as she heard the sounds of struggle outside. Minutes felt like hours. Then finally the noise stopped. Silence returned, heavy, thick, terrifying. Lyra's heart pounded. She could barely breathe. And then the door opened. Marcus stepped inside, bruised and tired, but alive. He carried no weapon now, only resolve in his eyes. "It's over," he said softly. "They won't come back." Lyra's vision blurred with tears. She stood, her legs weak, and before she could stop herself, she rushed to him. The child between them whimpered softly as Lyra pressed her forehead against Marcus's chest, sobbing. "You could have died," she whispered. "You risked everything." Marcus rested a gentle hand on her head. "Some things are worth risking everything for," he said quietly. "You and her, you're worth it." Lyra's tears fell freely now. For so long, she had believed love was something her kind could never have with humans. But standing there, feeling his heartbeat under her cheek, she realized something powerful. Love was not bound by race, species, or world. It was made of courage, sacrifice, and trust. That night, as the stars shone through the window, Lyra finally believed that the universe still had kindness left in it, and that, somehow, a human had taught her heart to hope again. The morning after the fight came quietly. The air smelled of rain, washing away the scent of smoke and fear that had filled the night. The small home stood still, half broken but full of warmth. Inside, Lyra watched Marcus as he cleaned his wounds. His hands shook slightly, but he smiled whenever he saw her looking at him. Lyra sat near the window, holding her child close. Sunlight touched her pale skin, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a prisoner or a servant. She felt safe. Her heart, once cold from years of pain and loss, now beat with something gentle, something she had almost forgotten existed. Marcus broke the silence first. "You should rest," he said softly. "You've been through enough." Lyra looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. "You fought for me," she whispered. "You almost died." "For someone like me?" Marcus chuckled faintly. "Someone like you? Lyra, you're not just someone. You're brave, kind, and stronger than anyone I know. You saved me too in your own way." She tilted her head, confused. "Saved you?" He nodded. "Before you came, I lived alone, just surviving, not living. Every day felt empty. But you and your little one, you gave this place meaning again. You made me remember what it feels like to care." Lyra's eyes shimmered with tears. She wanted to speak, but no words came. Instead, she placed her hand gently over his. It was a simple gesture, but it said everything. "Thank you, I see you, I feel the same." Days turned into weeks. Marcus repaired the house, and Lyra helped, learning his ways, his words, his laughter. She cooked with him, cared for the animals, and learned to grow the small green plants he called herbs. The child, once weak and quiet, began to laugh and run between them. Sometimes, at night, they sat together under the stars. Lyra often stared at the sky, wondering if her people would ever know peace, if other mothers like her were still suffering somewhere out there. Marcus would always notice her silence and place an arm around her shoulders. "You're home now," he would say. "You don't have to look back." One evening, as the wind carried the scent of blooming flowers, Marcus took something from his pocket, a small ring made from metal and glass, shaped like a tiny star. He knelt in front of her. Lyra's eyes widened. "Marcus, what are you doing?" He smiled nervously. "Humans have a tradition. When we find someone we love, we promise to stay with them, no matter what. This ring is that promise." Tears welled in Lyra's eyes as she looked at the shining piece of metal. "But I am not human," she whispered. "I cannot give you children like your kind. I do not even belong to your world." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Love doesn't care about blood or shape, Lyra. You've already given me a family. You and your little one, you're all I'll ever need." For a moment, Lyra could only stare at him. Then she broke down, her tears falling freely as she nodded and took his hands. "Then I promise too," she whispered. "I will stay, as long as the stars shine above us." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger and she smiled through her tears. In that moment, two souls from different worlds made a vow that no distance, no hatred, and no fear could ever break. Years later, travelers who passed through the quiet valley would speak of a strange home where laughter could be heard every morning, where a human man and an alien woman lived together in peace, raising their child beneath the wide-open sky. Some said it was impossible, others said it was a story. But those who had seen them with their own eyes knew the truth, that love had found its way across the stars, and that sometimes the bravest act of all was to choose kindness over fear. And so, in a universe filled with war and greed, one small home on a forgotten world stood as proof of humanity's greatest power, the power to love beyond worlds.